Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Overwatch. Lately, we're on a little bit of a hiatus, but we are back and on a track. And today, we've got a very special guest. We have Harry Legday, Pollitt, wonderful Contenders caster, and I'm pretty sure future Overwatch League caster as well. How are you doing, man?
I'm pretty good. Is THX sending you like cease and desist about that intro sound? It reminds
It's
me of
pretty-
when I used to be in the old theater with.
It's pretty epic, man. I always loved that sound too. Uh, well, outside of that, before I have like this uncanny ability to start everything I do with a tangent. So we're just actually going to go ahead and go right into this thing because it's called Overwatch Lately. So let's talk about what's been going on in Overwatch lately. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus, so we have a little bit of news to catch up on, but a lot of it is going to have to do with Overwatch League and Overwatch League teams. First up, we've got Gladiators Legion going through a couple changes. Some of their coaching staff has left, as well as Sentinels and Crunky Sports splitting up. Legday, what do you think of all of these changes for a team that did make the playoffs?
I feel like Gladiators right now, they seem like they're in a pretty good place, but there's always potential that we don't know, is like whether Deepay wanted more money and that couldn't be offered to him by Crunky. How's it pronounced? I'm not American.
I think it's Crunky. Yeah, sorry, just regular Gladiators. I am a Contenders caster who consistently casts Gladiators Legion. So, yeah, so the Gladiators, just in general, they separated. So Sentinels and Crunky both owned Gladiators, the brand, and now I believe Sentinels has been cut off from that, and Crunky is going to be doing their own thing with the Gladiators, or with their own esports stuff.
I guess they're done paying Sentinels to do it for them. They'd prefer to have like they'd prefer to have an internal team that does it, and that makes sense given that they've also purchased a stake in the Call of Duty League, right? I think they are also going to be presenting Los Angeles there, so I imagine that would indicate further investment from Crunky into other esports leagues as well, not necessarily Activision Blizzard related. We might see them move into things like League of Legends or even Hearthstone. I don't know if Hearthstone has teams. I assume we just have players, which may not require quite so much management, but evidently Crunky are just investing in infrastructure. And
that's really good though, right? Because in esports, infrastructure is what we need.
Oh yeah, like you need these sort of like bastions of stability for players who are, up until they get into Overwatch League and up until they're performing in Overwatch League for that matter, a quite tumultuous career. Like we all know, the path to pro can be a journey of occasional poachers, weird losses, upsets, and strange victories. And people need a lot of support when they get to that main stage with a lot of people watching them, because Overwatch has got one of the most supportive communities, but in every single community where there is competition, especially in sport, there are people who expect a lot when you get onto their team, especially if it's an established team like the Gladiators. It's been around for 2 years. Someone who goes onto Gladiators now and messes up, they've got 2 years worth of Gladiators fans who are possibly going to be mad at them for that. And that will require a lot of background support to make sure those players aren't letting that go to their head. It's not weighing on them, because like in psychology, we have these sort of like performance. I forget what it's called. What a waste of a degree.
I know. We were talking. I have a music degree, and that was a tad bit wasteful as well. Like a sports psychologist or like a sports therapist or something. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, there's a concept that when you are watched by people who make you nervous, it either exacerbates how bad you are or exacerbates how good you are. It means that you're either going to perform incredibly well compared to what you usually would, or incredibly poorly compared to what you usually would. And if you're on a bit of a downward slump, that can be very much a huge detriment to you. Whereas if you feel that there's positive enforcement from a crowd, like we see at homestands, a lot of the players recounted how much it helped them. And so, some people would say, oh, that's PR. They're just there to say, hey, thanks for coming out, crowd. Continue to spend money on us. But a lot of people would argue that it's definitely serious to have those kind of people behind you, even in the World Cups, where people weren't necessarily rooting for their own national teams. They were rooting for other nationality teams when theirs wasn't playing. They could feel that in the stadium.
Yeah, and it's just important to know that this is still a burgeoning industry, right? And as it matures, you're gonna need that type of facilitation and that type of support within every single one of these teams. So I think you bring up a really good point there. But let's go ahead and move on to something that I think catches a lot of people attention, which is the PTR patch notes that did just get onto live yesterday. And so the big things here are we got some Sigma changes. We got an interesting Zarya change that people are a little confused about. But for you, is this a step in the right direction for cleaning up this meta just a little bit? Or even if this meta needs cleaning up, in your opinion?
I know that a lot of my friends on Twitter who are very mechanical skill in Overwatch are going to be very happy with Symmetra's beam width being lowered. That's going to mean that it's a little bit harder to aim. It's a lot less generous in terms of the hitbox that it will attach to an enemy, which means that you're going to have better tracking to get the most out of Symmetra. And of course, overall damage stats are also being brought down as well, which will bring them more in line when you go for those 1v1s. And the Zarya change, I think, is more of just like an adjustment. Because before, she could not achieve her maximum potential DPS of 190 when she was at 100 charge because of how the tick rate of Zarya's beam worked in the Overwatch engine. And that was a bug which was fixed, and the tick rate was now properly applied. And Overwatch were like, what have we done with this hero? Why was she tuned like this before? It's like, okay. Her damage will basically be the same as it was during the GOATS era, I think, because it's a better tick rate, but it's lower damage. So it just sort of works out as the same. And the better tick rate is actually a little bit better for lower skill players, because it means that even if you're just tracing over something for a little bit, that's a small hitbox, you will get more registered hits on that than you otherwise would have before.
Oh, yeah, and so you could potentially be getting more DPS anyway to compensate for that 20 damage nerf. But let's talk about the meta a little bit more, because someone here that got, I think, some changes, got a small buff on one ability and 3 nerfs was Sigma. And there's been a lot of people on Twitter saying that, oh, this new GOATS, right, as too visually displeasing. There's too much going on in the screen. Do you think that they have something, are they speaking from a place where you agree, or do you think that these changes are good for Sigma, but in the greater scheme of the meta, are they going to really change anything?
I'm not really sure how they'll work in terms of whether it will mess with Sigma's viability. It may be that enough damage is done by other tanks now that they can effectively play into that role, but right now Sigma's in a super good place because his ult is just super powerful when you can do a huge amount of damage with the hyperspheres. And you can also do a lot of damage with hyperspheres because they play into an inherent understanding that a lot of players have of the game and what safety means within Overwatch. Physical cover is often presented as, okay, I'm in cover, I'm not going to get shot here unless someone comes around the corner. So you play pretty close to those corners. But you have to unlearn that habit when you're playing against Sigma, because you can get bounce shots which do a huge amount of damage on you. If he directs with a hypersphere, that's doing like 120 damage if he gets them with both. So it forces players to relearn what a safe spot is within Overwatch, and that's what allows him to get his ult so quickly in current gameplay and be able to use that stupendously powerful ult all the time. And like you said, people are very concerned about how the game looks to watch, and obviously as casters, that's a huge concern to us, because we can read the game simply because it's our job. We spend thousands of hours every year watching Overwatch, so our brains are sort of tuned to be able to just facilitate, understand this information, and figure out what we want to say about it. But to people who just watch Overwatch for fun, sometimes they're not even paying that much attention. If you look at the screen and it's filled with a lot of basically LEDs, you're wondering what's going on. And there were changes to barrier transparency that Blizzard made, which make it a bit easier to see through them. And I'm not really sure how this problem can be countered inside of a spectator client. It would require like a more innovative idea than what I have as a caster. But I do think it's a very legitimate concern. I don't think it's so much a concern for players, because part of the advantage of a barrier is the obfuscation of vision, and you've got to deal with that as someone who's playing into barriers. It's just part of how a barrier works. It not only provides protection, but it has a little bit of obfuscation with it as well. But for spectators, it's a very real complaint.
So I actually heard something the other day that I thought was really interesting that I want to throw by you. So basically, with Overwatch League, or a lot of esports, or just sports in general, developing new viewership has been difficult for some. So for traditional sports, baseball had a terrible time developing new viewership, right? And so what conversation I was having with this person is this meta is not very good for someone who might want to tune into Overwatch for the first or second time and try to get into it. There just is too much, versus what GOATS was bringing a little while back when everything was on the screen. It was cooldown dependent, and since you got to see the same thing over and over again, you got to learn with the meta. What do you think about that? Do you think if this meta continues that we might potentially have a harder time developing new viewership because of the lack of clarity?
there's a very real potential of that. And I think it may also be because there aren't so many pop-off moments with these current compositions. Like, people just take super long to die. Reaper's got self-sustain. Doomfist's got self-sustain. May's got self-sustain. Orissa's got Fortify. Sigma's got self-sustain. Moira does a load of healing but fades away. And then you may have a Lucio who's just buggering off to somewhere else. And I think a lack of potential pop-off moments is potential anathema to people who are watching on things like ESPN. They come there for big sports. They want big moments. You want to see a touchdown. You want to see a home run. You want to see a 6K in an esport. That's not going to happen with this composition. And when you're faced with such a miasma of special effects, it can be a little bit less than appealing. But GOATs, watching it was like watching bowling, I think. Like, you don't need to know what's going on. You just know something's hitting something, and that's basically good, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with this, there's a lot of posturing and positioning, and for an experienced viewer, it has a lot to break down. It's very deep, very interesting, but for a new viewer, there's a lot to take in, and it's very hard to realize when a fight is won in some cases. Like, is this team winning? Like, that Doomfist just punched in. I think he did a lot of damage. He got hit with a rock. Is that bad?
And then all of a sudden the numbers change, right? It's like these advantages don't last as long. It kind of reminds me of Double Sniper when ultimates just didn't matter as much, right? Where it was all about that, you got to get the headshot. So ultimates weren't as effective as mechanical skill back then. In this kind of meta, it's a little bit amorphous in how people respond to it, right? Like you said, you don't really know exactly who's won the fight until it's like especially obvious, especially for us as casters, right? And it is still cooldown dependent. And to finish this topic off, a lot of people are saying this is, new GOATs. I hate that term. I don't like saying it, but I definitely see the similarities here. Do you see where they're coming from? Do you like having names like that for these comps in general?
I don't know. I think for communities just have a little bit of a meme amongst itself about it being new GOATs. What they basically mean is it just moves forward. but as if every comp that now is just all about WM wanting is new GOAT. I think that the current iteration is less towards that. It's more about allowing for your Doomfist to get himself like some kind of tactical insertion into the enemy team, and then you try and back that up. It's more like a surgical strike, like a a drone strike into the enemy team by using the Doomfist. But as a color caster, like I'm a fan of this meta because it means that there's always something I can talk about. Whether it was a cooldown usage here, where was Sigma's shield? Was it in a good place? How did Doomfist make its engagement? Was it followed up on? And the second DPS slot is also very easy to rotate. We can have a Reaper, we can have a May, we can have a Pharah, and all of those are interesting heroes to talk about, especially when it comes to color casting. So I can't say that I'm too displeased about this meta, apart from the fact that when I play ranked, people tell me to play Orisa and they can get the hell out.
I remember in NA Contenders, there's a new player named Cameron that came in. And
we love Cameron. I've met him.
Yeah. He was, so you might know this, but we were just blown away by how good of an Orisa he was. And then now I just kind of went like, he knew exactly what he was doing. He hit the right hero on the head, and we were like, is he an Orisa main? Right? Do those people exist? Is this someone here?
A tweet from Cameron just after GOATs died. Or when GOATs died in ranked, it was still being played in Overwatch League at the time. And it was just a career profile of him in comp. He was like 4.6 and he had 42 hours on Orisa, and the tweet was just a sad face. Because Cameron's classically a Reinhardt main. He loves Reinhardt, but because he just plays so much comp because he wasn't on a fully established team for such a long time, he was just forced to play Orisa, and that made him super good at Orisa. Go figure. Yeah.
he got the practice for sure. I also saw that he was on a new team going into Rivalcade, so I think you're gonna get to cast him this weekend, which is gonna be fun. But let's go ahead and get into some other stuff. So we've got a couple of really awesome things coming in from Blizzard. Currently, we've got the Brick Challenge or event with this awesome Bastion skin. I'm sure we're gonna throw it up here in just a second. Do you have the skin already? And if you could choose another Lego skin, who would it be?
Oh, okay. Other Lego skins. That's a toughie. Because, like, I would want it for my main heroes, which are Reinhardt and Winston, but at the same time, there's probably a lot more scope for one like D.Va, because you could just have... Oh, but would you have a pilot? Would the pilot D.Va be Lego?
Oh, it could be like the Lego dude, right? Just like the yellow head, kind of like in Lego Batman.
Yeah, but that's the question. Would you have a Lego mech or a Lego D.Va like that?
Or both. Sometimes too much is a good thing. I was thinking it would be funny to have a wrecking ball Lego because since Legos aren't circles or it can't do curves, I thought that would just be visually hilarious to see like a Katamari Damacy type of ball going around.
My favorite animation in the entire game is Hammond just jumping as a wrecking ball when it's rolled up and not moving. So it just looks so stupid. It's just stationary ball going up and down. It looks like it's on a string and someone's just pulling it up.
It's like those that desk thing that like
like a Newton's cradle.
Yeah, man, you were way smarter than me. You used miasma. You used the word miasma earlier, like correctly, which props to you, by the way.
Well, the major of my degree was in English, so if I didn't know words, that would have been a lot of wasted money, just like the psychology bit.
Didn't Hex major in English as well?
I think so. He's got a lot of degrees.
He does. Very, very well educated guy.
And he was a writer for a long time as well.
Yep. He always uses writing workshops as like a nice metaphor for casting VOD reviews. But now let's talk a little bit just quickly. So Sinatra announced that the MVP skin for the next year is going to be I was about to say going to be Sinatra. That would be crazy. Is going to be Zarya, which I think is very apt. And I think really good because I think if you were to look at just pound for pound quality of skins, I think Zarya is probably on the bottom side of that.
Zarya has ass tier skins.
Yeah.
The only good one, in my opinion, is form of like Golden Mask, like the Cybertron one. It's Transformers ass Zarya. But it's
I like the Barbarian one.
Yeah, but Barbarian's also good. And I did play that Barbarian in Diablo for a long time as well, so it's kind of good for me. But those two are like the two good legendary skins. And I'm not so much a fan of the other ones. I don't like the goth ones too much.
Yeah,
I guess that's just a personal aesthetic choice.
Cool, I guess.
I used the Olympic
like,
ones
cool,
for a long time, but that's just because it's the best of a bad bunch.
Well said, man. What do you think he's gonna go for? Right, like you've got there's a lot of options.
Could it possibly
I like
be an alien one? Is he gonna have an Area 51 cannon?
Right? That would be.
They're gonna get it in the raid later.
Sorry,
oh no, that's a Twitter meme waiting to happen. Go into Area 51 to find Sinatra's MVP skin.
Put it on Twitter right now. I'll wait. But I think it's going to be good. I think getting some special skin for Zarya will be nice because I think she's lacking for sure. And I loved Jonax from this past year, the octopus squid skin.
I'm wearing Jonak right now, wrong side. There it is.
There it is. Too bad he won't be in Philadelphia.
He might turn up. Might just go and have a look.
Yeah, exactly. But there are some things that do come to an end, and I don't know if you ever made it to Blizzard Arena Legday. Did you ever get there?
No, I'm afraid I didn't.
But
going to BlizzCon is going to be my first time in the USA.
Oh, that's going to be fun. I'll see you there. But it was the very last game ever in the Blizzard Arena. I believe it was the old Tonight Show studio. I was lucky enough to be able to work at Blizzard Arena in my first season of Contenders in North America. I got to pee in the same toilet as Johnny Carson, which I tell everybody.
Wait, do they still have the toilets from back then? Have they not refitted?
Yeah, okay. So there's actually a lot of like hallways in the dressing room because that's how like celebrities and Johnny Carson would leave without getting a scene / how his mistresses would get in and out. This could be an urban legend, but this is what I was told.
I am just Googling what Johnny Carson looks like. Oh,
and
yeah.
So,
I got it.
Yeah. And so his old dressing room has a lot of his old stuff. So there's like a shower and a toilet back there and like an area where like he could hang out and stuff, and we got to hang out there our first and last season in Burbank for North American Contenders. But there is a little special magic about the place, and it was the first thing that we got to see Overwatch League in after Contender Season 0. But we're all pretty excited for it to move into those homesteads. Even though Blizzard Arena will have a special place in our heart, it's still time to level up Legday, and it's time to fill those stadiums.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be super interesting, and I'm so excited to go to a London Spitfire Hempstead when they finally release those tickets. Come on, London, anytime now. And I'll probably try go to the Paris once as well. Not too much of a fan of Paris as a city, but
why? What's wrong with Paris?
The French people there were very rude.
I
and also Charles de Gaulle was designed by Satan as an airport. in order
Oh,
to trap
I
people
have,
forever.
I have heard that. I have definitely heard that. But like,
But,
part of me is like, am I offended by the French statement? Is that, am I offended? Um,
do I have some nebulous connection by which I'm offended by
I know,
like they're
right?
not quite liking Paris very much? Like,
I
to be
want to
fair,
be outraged.
I hate a lot of cities.
Okay, okay. What's your top three hated cities?
Oh, okay. Probably Paris, Birmingham,
Said aggressively. Paris.
and I don't know. I'm saving one of the top three for when I go to America.
Ouch.
Because I haven't witnessed LA traffic yet.
You might. Okay, so LA is definitely a love or hate thing. Most of us in America, unless you live in LA, hate it, I would say.
Wait, the people who don't experience the traffic hate it?
Well, I don't know. I might be wrong here, but I hate LA. That's just what a thing that I hate is LA for sure. It's just like I like San Francisco a lot more. It's a preference thing, right? It's like Pokemon Blue or Red, right? You hate one, you like the other. I had this like unnecessary hatred for Charmander because he was the master for Pokemon Red and I was a blue guy. So it has no bearing in anything, but you'll find out when you come to Anaheim for BlizzCon. Not quite LA.
I'm landing in LAX, so I'm going to get enough of a taste of LA to decide if I hate it. Because I'm definitely going to be in LA for at least 12 hours while I try and get to Anaheim.
Yeah. I landed in LA 2 BlizzCons ago at like 5, and it was like 9 o'clock before I made it to Anaheim. And then there's a time where I actually dropped my boss off. I was doing some business. I dropped my boss off at the Orange County Airport, and it should only be a 1-hour drive back to Burbank, but my boss made it back to Colorado before I made it to LA. So just put it into perspective. That stuff is
How far is Colorado? Like, it's Midwest, right?
So it was a flight. So it was like 3
okay.
It was like 2.5 hours, 3 hours, and her flight was like moderately delayed, and she still got to Colorado before I got back to LA. Yeah. Good luck, man. Anyway,
You're selling this trip to me.
Well, speaking of travel, this was actually a really good segue. World Cup teams are starting to find funding. So I think Norway just got funded. I think maybe by Omen, by HP. I just read
that was Netherlands.
Netherlands.
Possibly Norway, maybe. I know Netherlands got funded by Omen.
And South Africa just got funded as well. Unfortunately, teams like Argentina and Egypt had to drop out or were unable to secure funding. How do you think this is all going so far? I think the teams that have potential, like Netherlands and Norway, have had esports history in the past. I'm still waiting to see if Brazil in South America is going to get funded, but it's been very interesting seeing how these teams are getting there. Do you think it's actually good that these teams are looking for potential partnerships that might actually end up developing into something else, or is there a little bit too much of a gateway or like a gate keeping some good teams away from BlizzCon this year?
Well, one of the good things about the partnerships that are being developed at the moment is that it's creating a lot of very experienced GMs in the Overwatch sphere, which, as people who are very interested in Tier 2, you and I want teams to have sponsorships, to have money, because Tier 2 people need to eat. You and I do, the players do, and we're currently in drought season. Thank God for Rivalcade. For coming in and being a savior of Tier 2 before Gauntlet. But it's going to be a rough couple of months, if I was to say, for a lot of Tier 2 players without a consistent contender season to play in, and only a practice season of Open Division, which I need to get into so I can just get 10 quid off like Modern Warfare or something. But yeah, I think experienced GMs who can actually do business is the biggest gain from this particular model, because those are going to come back, especially to Europe, because obviously we have a much larger density of teams across our contender sphere when it comes to the countries compared to America, which has 1, 2 if you count Canada, 3 if you count Mexico. But I'm kind of sad about South America. I do wish there was like an option where they could like coalesce and come as a continent, but that would kind of undermine the premise.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of talent down there that just doesn't get showcased. Like, Klaus is no longer with Uprising Academy, so the only South American representative in all of Overwatch is Alamong on Boston Uprising, and it's not like there's a lack of talent down there.
Yeah, for sure. I met quite a few from low key when I was doing Atlantic Showdown. I helped them to book some scrims, which was quite nice. Got them up against Giganti, just me brushing off my shoulder as Legday, scrim manager.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I really enjoyed meeting the low key guys, and they were very fun to talk to. And Obviously, they didn't do overly well at Atlantic Showdown, but they were against some top-tier contenders teams, and I think we can agree that World Cup teams are a little bit weaker, and teams that come together as a package deal, like those from Brazil, can be very strong. Unfortunately, France doesn't always work out.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because 2 World Cups ago, Brazil was kind of like the belle of the ball, right? They got third at that North American regional. They had that really amazing reverse sweep against Norway. They took a game off of the U.S. Full disclosure, I'm coming from a definite place of bias as I did get my start casting South American Overwatch. And so I've gotten to know and learn a lot about those players, and they're talented. Liko, very, very talented. A little bit surprised he hasn't been brought up to a North American team just yet, but there's talent all over the world, and the World Cup should represent that. I'm glad some teams are finding funding right now, but I wish it could be a little bit more inclusive in that way. It's like, because they have to pay to go to BlizzCon, you're eliminating teams that might already have lost, right? Yeah. But you still don't get like the fanfare of it.
There is at least some fanfare in that I believe it's going to be the first African nation to actually attend BlizzCon. I believe Egypt played before, but only in online qualifiers, never in a physical qualifier. I'm not sure if Saudi Arabia, but I don't know if we technically count that as Africa. Like, we just have Middle East over in its own little pocket, along with Team Kuwait, who I think also have funding, but I'm not quite sure. Like, we assumed that Saudi Arabia would have funding, because obviously they have quite lively domestic scene in that they had that $200,000 prize pool.
There's that contenders team, Oshtek, right? That
Warriors,
that made it into the last rounds of Open Division. So there's definitely history there.
They made it all the way to trials, and actually they had a little bit of fun against British Hurricane as well back when they went into trials back in season 3 of 2018. Yes, 2018. I was trying to remember what year it was last year. My brain is such a mess. I spend so much time on the road. All my internal calendar is like how many days until my next flight. I've got
it's
no
just like checking
days, months.
I'm alive. I am alive. Yes.
I'm alive. Okay. I'm flying in 4 days. Good. Just continue being alive for 4 days. Remember, we'll hand on it.
Awesome. Well, hopefully World Cup will be that fanfare that we want. I'm excited to see what other teams go through it. And while we're here, who do you got for this World Cup? I'm assuming you're probably going to be casting some of these teams. So let's say, who are you most excited to maybe learn about, a team that isn't part of that top 3, US, China, South Korea, and who do you think is going to take it?
It's got to be the Nordics. Well, in terms of people I'm excited about, I don't know if the Nordics are going to take it, but Iceland and Denmark right now, they are hot shit.
Iceland is technically the best team in Europe right now, right?
They absolutely are. And I'm really excited about Denmark. I said it so many times during the broadcast of the EU contenders. I'm pretty sure everyone's sick of hearing it, but they have a tank now. Like, for 3 years, they've had no main tank. They've had a main tank, but they haven't had a main tank. But now they have a main tank in Henningsen. So that's super exciting. There's also seeing a little bit of a change of roster. They no longer have Ding. Instead, they're using Scalar, who I believe was on Uprising Academy this time around.
No, Scalar was on. Yeah, he was on Uprising Academy, I believe. Because he's
Uprising
a good Moira player, I remember.
Yeah, Scalar is a good Moira player. That much I can definitely attest to. But it's interesting to wonder how these teams are going to shake up in terms of who's going to turn up on Sigma. And obviously, Iceland, they got Fincy, one of the only Overwatch League players. Well, he's the only one. Until Hafikul gets brought up, of course. But it's kind of weird for Iceland in that Iceland is kind of like the UK. No offense to the UK players, but the UK is really good at main tanks. And Iceland's really good at off tanks. And the rest of them, they're good. But they're not as good as our primary export. Like, what would you say is America's primary role in terms of good exports? What do you have the most good players at?
Oh, because you've got on the spot.
You've got pretty sparse talent. Like, you guys have got something good in everything.
So I think that was like a thing, like that was a storyline going into World Cup last year, was the fact that like our stars are a little bit spread out because there's so many of us. Right, yeah. So we're able to.
You guys have a population of what, 360 million?
Yeah, 365 or something. Because like, Yeah. So you got
I'm counting you guys
Sinatra,
from across the
you got
pond with my
Super.
binoculars.
I think our supports are pretty good, to be completely honest with you. Like I think and then DPS, actually, I think it is pretty sparse. It's pretty. I think you can name at least one person in every role that's pretty much kind of a star, especially the three coming from the shock.
You guys don't really have a main export. You've got a pretty balanced team.
Main export is disappointment. That's what I would have to say.
Well, so long as you say it, not me.
So
like,
outside
I wait
of the
until
Atlantic,
afterwards to BM you.
outside of the Atlantic Showdown, which was like, in my opinion, one of the first things I've ever seen like North America really perform at, right? And then we got that League of Legends tournament where we got some stuff.
With 5 Koreans.
I mean, they're still under our banner, right? The flag was the same.
Yeah, and MV had what, 3 Europeans? No, 2 Europeans.
Anyway, so we have.
That's what I'm trying to do. Claw something back.
Yeah, and so in international competition, it's been very interesting when it comes to a lot of North American teams because I think we have a tendency to get. Man, these are so stupid excuses I'm about to say. I was like, we have a tendency to be really jet lagged and not care much.
Did you see jet lagged at
I
the
know.
North American stops of every single World Cup?
I was there in person, man. I was trying to hooligan. Like I remember after that first game against UK, I was like, dude. I turned to Mushu and I was like, man, we might lose this. We might actually lose this game. And then we did. And so, and then I was also there for that Korea game, South Korea game, which was an epic game. I'll forever remember.
Best game of the entire tournament.
Yeah, I
watched it in a taxi. I was on my way to a cousin's wedding.
That haunted for the rest of my life. That was like a moment of Overwatch where I was like, I love this shit. But yeah, I think we tend to disappoint in international competition because I think stereotypically American players aren't taking it as seriously. I think that goes across a lot of esports. That's a stereotype that we've gotten, and I think that my hope is that these players go to Gauntlet and they don't spend most of the time partying because South Korea is a really fun place to be, right? It's not like you're going to Boomtown, Montana, right? You're going to an awesome place. Like South Korea is a really great place to be young, right? And to have fun. And so a lot of these kids are, 14 to 21 years old, and you got to keep it under control, right? And a lot of the American players too don't have to think about being away from family for that long, right? I think that's something that's going to be pretty impactful for some of our players going through, especially since a lot of them are young, if their parents aren't going with them. Because we've got some 14-year-olds going across the way, but this is all just excuses. It's just traditionally we've all lost to South Korea, so we can all.
I loved that there was did you guys have a redraw at one point, or at least there was talk of a redraw, and it was South Korea again twice in a row?
Yeah, I was there. So bringing it back to Contenders Season 0. Classic boop of the week here. My actual
did you know that you are still the pinned video on the Contenders YouTube channel?
Oh, yeah. I did not know that.
Well, one of your top 5 plays.
Oh, that's awesome. Man, I miss doing those. I was working with a buddy of mine to come up with those names, but yeah, it was I was there, and I remember we were all sitting in the room. It was Mr. X who did the drawing, and I forget who it was, but someone said, "You're gonna draw South Korea again. You know that, right?" And then we were all like, "Don't say that, because it's gonna happen." It sounds like something Monty would say, but I'm not sure it was him, so I can't say this for sure.
That sounds like. I imagined that, and it was Monty just materialized out of nowhere. It's just saying, you're going to draw South Korea.
And then because we started talking about it the day before, and so we had a whole day of it being can you imagine if we drew South Korea again? It was a joke. X was could you imagine if we drew South Korea again? He goes up there and he draws South Korea for us. So that's why he was so dejected when he drew it, because we all predicted it. It was in the air. It was our fault.
Wow. So next time they blame AVRL, I'll be like, no, blame Boop.
Yeah, it was Boop in a crew. That was also the same day where Golden Boy made me second guess anytime I wore the color blue. But that's another story. We were playing some beer pong at a bar. And we were going. It was me and my buddy against Bren and Sideshow, and Puckett was our coach, and Golden Boy was their coach, and they were talking mad trash. And man, I was wearing my favorite hoodie, which was blue, and, and Golden Boy goes, "Boop, you don't even look good in blue," and I'm like, "Oh no." Yeah, and I literally didn't hit another cup for like 6 or 7 attempts. We did win that game, by the way. Suck it. All right, but we got to move on.
You were mental bloomed.
Yeah. Shut up, Legday. All right, so we got to start talking about not World Cup. We got to start talking about grand finals. We've got Shocks and the Shock and the Titans. You got me all. I'm all thinking about blue right now. Shock versus Titans in the grand finals. What's really cool is that we're going to have some Twitch rewards for watching. So there's going to be cool sprays and things that you can receive just by watching through Twitch. But my question to you, Legday, is how do you think this season went? Just like in your opinion, especially compared to the first season.
I think it was actually super awesome. Like, especially with the introduction of 2-2 midway through. Some people were like, competitive integrity, but at the same time, like, it's an entertainment product, boys. You need to have consistent shakeups to make it interesting. The cold hard fact of it was, if you weren't super invested in it, like me or you were getting bored. Like, people didn't want to watch the same thing for 4-5 months because they're like, okay. At that point, you're like, okay, I'm gonna watch my team play, and my team is only playing 7 matches a stage now, so I'll just tune in then and watch Goats versus Goats. And I loved casting Goats. I'm sure you enjoyed casting Goats as well.
I very much enjoyed casting Goats.
Like Goats was like an optimal caster meta because the engagements were so clean, they were so visible, which allowed for great handoffs. Like I would always hand off, and there's the Earth Shatter, and then just drop jaws.
Oh, the grab comes in, right?
Like, it was perfect for color casters, and play-by-players always got to just like pick up on a big moment. So it was a good caster meta, and obviously there's a lot of credit to the Overwatch League casters that they did manage to make a lot of games which were the same thing again and again, very engaging. So hats off to them for that. But like the change-up I think was very good for it, and I've talked at length on my own stream about how I think role lock affects player psychology on the casual level, and that's for want of a better phrase, when you play a video game, you have a set of gamer goals which you want to achieve with this investment of time. And I think that by queuing for a particular role, knowing you'll have a support structure behind you, which will allow you to play on that role in a manner you deem to be your best, potentially, that you have a much easier chance of achieving those gamer goals you set out for than the previous system, where you could be mired in guilt, potentially, for being the one who tries to achieve that, but at the expense of a team, or feel like you are giving up your own enjoyment to allow other people who you don't particularly respect in those roles, who just like interlock DPS, to have their own say. So I've sort of gone on a tangent here about the entire game, but I think 2-2 was a really good change. Unfortunately, the queue times have been laughable in some cases for high-ranked streamers, and I'm looking forward to see what Blizzard has in mind to try and make those work, because it's got me stumped.
Yeah,
to say the least. Like, I don't know how.
I think people, especially at high elos, would be like okay waiting 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but some of these like 20-minute queues,
hour queues.
Yes, 65 is the highest I've seen on Twitter. Is ridiculous, especially since like some of my DC in that game, right? And then you might have to wait another hour before getting it.
Like if you get Paris and someone dodges, then you're throwing your PC out.
Could you imagine having to wait an hour and then getting Paris? That sucks.
I also should mention, like, I just like Paris as a city just because I don't like the map so much. And like, I think Paris is super easy to fix as well. Just give us a door into the back of the bakery, and Paris is fixed. Yeah, it's just the other thing about Paris that's really frustrating to me is that it's the same thing over and over again, right? It's not like, it doesn't lend itself to creativity at all. And you kind of just do the same thing and try the same thing, and it's super frustrating. Paris is also not my favorite map to cast in general. It is cool that the point is outside at the beginning, though. That's cool, I guess.
It's
Yeah,
pretty.
like Paris is a really beautiful map, and I love the sort of like things that they've included there, like a playable piano and the Omnic singing. Like I think a really good example of a map which has evolved over time in terms of the different setups you see is Rialto. Like Rialto is always interesting to cast because there are so many different potential setups for a defense. We often see the 90-degree first bend defense where it's just at the end of a bridge, or you get the second bend defense, which is often the hardest point to capture, but you give up a huge amount of push beforehand. You get the spawn door defense, you get the high ground defense outside the spawn doors. Some people even play bridge to try and get environmental kills as well. And it's just a super variable map where you never know exactly what you're going to get. And that's what makes one of those very fun to cast, at least. To play, I really like Rialto as well, but some people don't like it.
It's a land of right angles. It can be really frustrating, especially stairs on B. But we're on again a little bit of a tangent. Is Paris in the map pool?
Would it be?
I hope
Would
not.
it be a Boop show if it was not a tangent?
Probably not. So let's keep going though. So, in your opinion, do you think the two best teams made it? And who you got? What's your scoreline going to be?
I think the two best teams definitely made it. Like I love seeing that they paid off the consistent performance they had within the season as well. And I've got to admit, thank God for Double Elim. Like Double Elim is superior, the superior format for any esports organization. If you've got the time to do it, if you've got the resources to do it, which Overwatch League definitely does, it should always be Double Elim. So I'm super happy they went with that. Even better, I would have gone for Double Elim in the play-ins, but it's a little bit of a time constraint, and they're only going to broadcast for us for 2 days, so I can let that one slide. I'll let that one go this time. I'm watching you. but Double Elim was a huge godsend, especially for Shock. Just getting that upset at the start. That's such a good storyline, dude.
And then having
to stage it through lower bracket.
Yeah, having to like march through the lower bracket. It kind of reminds me. So I'm a huge tennis fan. And it kind of reminds me of like when Serena Williams doesn't play for a year and then comes in and then just like destroys everybody. That's an awesome storyline, right? It's like you don't get that type of storyline in tennis
she
though,
recently
because
got beaten by a teenager.
Yeah, she's made like I think 3 finals out of the last 5 and have gotten beaten by a teenager, and I think all of them so far. But anyway, the reason why I bring her up is even though it's a really great storyline that she wasn't playing, blah blah blah, right? How cool would it be if it was like, all right. So instead of like 128 people, which is what I think they start with, we're going to start with 32, and it's going to be double Elim, and she's going to get into the tournament, and she loses in the first round, marches all the way back to the final, and wins, right? Like that is pure entertainment and pure sports, and that's why like Shock getting beaten in the first round by an upstart. And I remember I was on a podcast, and so it was like, what's cool about double Elim? And I was like, double Elim's great because it helps the 2 best teams actually make it to the final, right? Because if you're the 2 best teams, sometimes you trip and you trip up, just like the Shock did, because Atlanta at the time was playing out of their minds. But you still get the chance to redo it, right? And then you get that fervor and that passion. And part of me thinks that they're going to be more prepared for this final because they made it through that losers bracket.
Like at the end of the day, it's statistics. Like, if you have a single Elim, you are less likely to have consistently good teams in the final because consistency isn't what will reward you in a single Elim bracket. Consistency will maybe just give way to luck for a while, and then you are potentially in a place where something like the Apex Season 1 final happens, where you have a Freak of Freaks Blue getting just ass blasted by Envy in the finals, and it's like, oh, so I guess the semifinals is the one we're all gonna remember then, right, guys?
Exactly. And that's that happens occasionally. It happens in a lot of sports. Say the AFC Championship in football is the 2 best teams. Unfortunately, the NFC is not going to be as weak, and the Super Bowl is a stop, right? You don't want that. I really don't think it's going to be the same case here because I think so too. I think the 2 best teams did make it into the finals. I'm so excited to see what they're going to be able to do in Philadelphia. I'm jealous of all my friends that are going because they've got a couple good performances there. I think they got Armin van Buren and Zed that are going to be performing at grand finals. And back in college, I was into the EDM. And so I'm pretty jealous that they get to go to that concert because I've been a big fan of Zed, who's a pretty proficient Widowmaker player as well. And he's going to be performing at Grand Finals, which is going to be awesome. So who you got, though? Shock or Titans?
Who can really predict this? Well, I want to say Shock. Like, Shock right now, I think they've been able to learn so much. Like, there's only so much Grooming can do when it comes to learning a new meta, learning how Sigma's going to work. And Shock have plain and simple had more time with Sigma right now because they've had to play more matches and they've learned how to adopt Sigma strategies in a chaotic comms situation. If you're in a scrim and things get chaotic, you can just calm things down. It doesn't matter. If you're in a losers bracket game, it always matters. And I think being able to effectively play with a Sigma in a high stakes environment where they were always on the knife's edge of being eliminated will have been the best potential training for Shock. Whereas Vancouver, they are fantastic. They are infallible in many cases, but they haven't had that pressure yet. They've only been in the upper bracket, and they haven't had so much time with Sigma. Janu's looking fantastic on it, but like they want to win every game, don't get me wrong, but they don't have that, this is the end of my season if I mess this up. If I fuck up now, everything is over.
Yeah, that kind of pressure is only developed in this situation, right? And a lot of these players have never been here before. This is their first playoff run, right? This is their first season in Overwatch League. I think a lot of people have forgotten that even though we've gotten stage finals and Titans have been so good, they were not here last season, right? They were not a team.
They weren't
last
Overwatch
season.
League level.
Yeah, and so I don't know. Runaway, not Overwatch League level. That's funny. I like how I said yeah just out of response because I was ready to agree with you. Yeah. No, but and then I was like, you got me. You evaded. They were always Overwatch League level. But outside of copy pastas, right? They have to perform on another stage, right? And this is also something that they haven't had to do in a very long time, right? Is perform in a packed arena with a lot of people watching and people actively rooting against them. And that is going to be tough for any team to take. But if anyone's going to be able to do it, it's probably going to be Titans, because I think Shock is going to be feeding off that energy. That's not something you're going to have to worry about for them.
They have Sinatra. The guy's an established villain. He knows how to work a crowd. Like he's become more of a hero recently, but before, like there was a fair amount of drama surrounding Sinatra, and he sort of like brushed up his public image. I imagine with the help of Brett and Co at NRG. But yeah, like he's an experienced villain. He loves it when the crowd's rooting against him. The guy's a serial teabagger. He wants to get a rise out of people. And getting to a playoffs in New York is definitely going to get a rise out of quite a few people. That's implying as well that like all the Vancouver people are going to turn up. Like the Canadians just going to trek down on their mooses or whatever. Come on in. And their hockey jerseys.
Yeah. And all of their apologies. All right, so you've got Shock going into it, and that's going to be it for what's going on in Overwatch lately. So now we're going to go ahead and do a segment I like to call Wait, That's Not Overwatch, where we take 5 minutes to talk about a passion of Legdays that's not Overwatch related. I think a lot of us talk so much about Overwatch. We just spent about 45 minutes doing just that. So let's talk about you, Leg. I'm really interested to know. So what would you say if you were to say, okay, if Overwatch just didn't exist, right? And I had to pursue a passion, whether it be in another game or another profession or be it in the gym. That's what Vast was talking about. What would you say is one of your biggest passions?
Probably be. I just love streaming and performing. Well, whether it's singing, whether it's streaming games, like I just enjoy being in front of a camera, which is very strange because I was not too much of an extrovert when I was growing up, but I very much learned to love streaming when it sort of like became my safe space, for want of a better word, when I had some shit going on at home. So like I've definitely pushed myself into now I'm a performer and I'm going to make this work one way or another. So I think if I wasn't casting Overwatch, I'd be streaming Overwatch. I just remembered that involved playing a lot of Orisa.
Yeah.
I'd be streaming WoW.
Yeah. WoW Classic. So what's cool though is that's actually something that we can both connect on, is that love of performance. I mentioned earlier that I was a music major. I don't know anyone who becomes a caster because they don't like attention, right? I think a lot of us feed off of being on camera, feed off of the eyes, feed off of the energy of a crowd. And while some people might say, oh, you might be too full of yourself, I think it's a skill, right? To be able to put yourself in front of a camera consistently present yourself in a really good way and also perform. I think a lot of people underrate how difficult that is.
Well, like it's a key skill for a caster. Like charisma is just the word. Like, if you don't like being in front of a camera, it's very hard to pull that off charismatically. Like, you've got to have a perfect act of being a shy, bashful person on camera to be at all engaging, because if you don't, you look like an amateur. Like, well, not an amateur caster, but just an amateur in front of a camera, which doesn't really engage people. They're like, this person shouldn't be here. They don't really want to do this. And if they can feel that you don't want to do something, or you look like you don't want to do something, if you're not going to be engaged with the performance you're giving, it's like it's like if you were forced to go up to an assembly in school and sing a song that your class had wrote, but you really don't want to. Like, no one's like invested in that performance. So like, okay, let's just freaking get through this, man. He doesn't like this. I don't like this. So just move it along, dude. Just move it along. So yeah, charisma is super important. Like, that's just basic shit. Any caster knows that, and anyone who watches casting knows that. But it explains why casting's often narrowed down to the people who do like the attention, because people who don't really survive.
It's not something. Well, it's not something that they're going to seek, right? They're not going to look through and find a way. Like, you know, for me, I always found a way, either in sports or in music, and now casting, to find some attention, right? Back in the day, I just quit when the tension went away. Like one time at a Taekwondo tournament, I got a gold medal because I cried. I was 16.
You got the gold medal for crying?
Yeah. So okay,
it's like, and the Crybaby of the Year award goes to
So I'm pretty sure I got robbed, but anyway, I was like, I thought I was hot stuff, man, and so I was like, I always had this problem in any game that I play is I try to be too flashy, right? I want to be like super cool while I'm doing something,
so your
right?
grapple shot 360 wouldn't make a no scope.
Yeah, 0% accuracy, BT dubs. But so I was like going up against these kids who were younger than me, and I was like, I got this. And so in Taekwondo, the scoring for sparring is like, if you're in the air and you kick, you get multiple points, right? So I decided that the best way to do it would to always be in the air. And so I didn't land
the crane approach.
Yeah, exactly. So like I just tried to be super fancy with like jump back kicks and forward front kicks, while these other kids were just like punching me in the chest, like getting free points, right? And then I was like putting my all into it. And I knew I looked the best, right? Maybe. And then I
but look. Unfortunately, it was a Taekwondo tournament, not like a gymnastics rehearsal.
Exactly. And then when they lined us all up to tell us what places we got, they gave me a bronze medal, and I just started crying. I don't know why. And I was like so into this, and so. Again, to prop up myself a little bit, I had just won the board breaking competition right before that, right? So I was like on a hot streak.
Did you do a flying kick on that one as well?
I did do a flying kick on that one, but that makes more sense that way, right? But so I started just like bawling, and then I realized in my head, I was like, I think I gotta like keep going here, man, because I feel like shit. And so yeah, and so eventually they like took the medal off of me, and I looked down, and I now have a gold medal on my chest as a 16-year-old sore loser getting beat by two 14-year-old kids in Taekwondo.
I think that might be one of the only instances in the real world of guilt tripping your way to an athletic achievement.
Yeah, what lesson did I learn there, right?
Apart from, like, I don't know, the fastest way to dehydrate yourself at a sporting event.
And so like everyone saw me, and so of course I never went back, right? And so like I
don't need to come back, losers. I got my gold medal and I'm leaving.
Yeah, throw up the bird as I walk out while sobbing.
Lassard out.
Yeah, exactly. Not my greatest moment. I was hyper competitive. I was like unnecessarily, like unhealthily competitive for a very long time, up until like maybe 3 years ago. And when I realized that like I got like
to Colorado.
No, I moved to Colorado when I was 18 for college, and I was still like,
if something in the air may well have mellowed you out in that.
Maybe. Some theories pertain that, you know, it just kind of happens. We're cool here. But no, so the other thing that I wanted to ask you is, what do you do to like hype yourself up for performance? So like everyone's got their systems, right? And in order to go up and perform, like for me, every time I go on the camera, no matter what, no matter how I feel, I tell myself I'm the best, right? That like I'm going to be the best caster, right? I'm going to be the best baseball player this time around, because that's, if I think I'm the best, then I'll act like the best, right? Do you have any like hype up moments for yourself? Do you have any like particular music you like to listen to?
I just jump around a little bit. I'm more like a physical warm up kind of guy. I'm bouncing on my toes. I'm feeling like, okay, baby, loosey goosey.
All right, man.
uh,
Well said.
I don't have too much of a ritual really. Like I just bounce around a bit, so I've got some like energy flowing through me. And I'm like, okay, I'm active, I'm good, I'm ready to go. My brain's awake, and my lips are moving. And then it goes off a break. I'm like, sup guys, or at least Joel says sup guys, and I'm there like,
Hey. All right. Well, speaking of your lips moving, let's keep them moving because we'll talk about a little bit more like you. So let's go back to Overwatch because something that, again, that we both have in common is we're both casters. We both cast tier 2. You've been doing it a little bit. You've been casting European contenders for a bit, I think, ever since the first season, right?
in the rebrand, yeah, I started in March of 2018, just
So,
after they went over to the beautiful Genji logo, which I do currently have on my stream deck. I don't know if I can actually show you guys. No, the cable isn't gonna. The cable is gonna reach. Look, there it is on my stream deck. It's beautiful. There we go. Oh,
support tier 2, everyone. So
absolutely.
what's it like to, and the other thing that some people might not know is that you and my current casting partner had a lot of time together casting some Chinese games super early in the morning with Mushu Beef asleep at the wheel.
Yeah, when Mushu was asleep, that's when the rest of it. I was just like, you want to do something irresponsible?
Yeah, and so what's it like to like I'd like to have you look in and just kind of talk about how you feel about starting, casting with someone that's not Jaws and moving on to European contenders. And now a lot of people say that you might be casting Owl. A lot of people are assuming there's going to be more casting slots because of all the different stadiums, and there's no way everyone can travel that way. So what's it like, man? A lot of people love your stuff, and it must feel pretty good.
It feels pretty good until I watch myself back, because every time I watch myself back, I'm like, how are you where you are? You are trash. You are dog shit, dude. Like, what are you doing? Like, listening back, I am hypercritical of myself, especially when I watch back with someone experienced. Like, occasionally I slip out of being hypercritical. I listen to myself and I'm like, yeah, that was pretty good. And then I watch the same thing back, like with Hex. I'm like, oh my days, what was this? What was I even thinking? Was I asleep at the wheel? Was I mooshooing this? Like, just as a quick story about Mushu being asleep at the wheel. One of the first major public broadcasts that Evie and I ever did was the first ever broadcast of a Open Division game, which was going to be the Open Division EU finals between August and Hungary and Angry Titans. And Evie and I had spent basically an entire week just messaging the managers of Angry Titans and August Hungary, just like, please let us cast, please let us cast, please let us cast. But at the time, there was no provision in the rules about casting because Blizzard hadn't set anything up for that kind of thing. So we're like, we might get disqualified. So we had to be like, Blanky, tell them. Let it happen. So we had to get copy paste from Blinky. We had to get Blinky to liaise with them as well. Blinky's the Blizzard head of Open Division for people who don't know about the staff. And eventually they relented after their first map started. So Moose had gone to bed. He assumed that this had been a bust. This had been a failure. So after his first map started, he said, okay, you can cast it. And we're like, oh my days. We need Mushu. So we were calling Mushu, and I don't know what time it was. It was probably like 3 or 4 in the morning from just like, it's happening, Mushu, get up. We need to cast this game. And eventually he did, to his credit. I think we only missed like 2 maps, maybe 1 map. And it was super special to feel like we were broadcasting something that maybe no one cared about, but also no one had cared enough to broadcast before. So we didn't know. It was new territory. And that was really special for Evie and I to be able to do.
Yeah.
And I completely forgot what the entire premise of our question was because I just got caught up in that memory.
Well, it was just like you kind of answer like how you felt about being a pretty well liked dude in this field because you've only had an upward trajectory so far from casting.
I was super lucky, to be fair.
I think all of us are, right? So that's the thing. So how I got onto season 0 was Carbon Entertainment. I was their last hire. and I got it through just like a mutual connection, and then Blizzard decided to give them a contract, and I was one of two personalities that they ended up keeping on because they liked me, and Gilfrost was the other one. So like we all
good
get
old
super,
left guy.
yeah. I used to cast with Left Guy. That was that's something that
I got to meet him at the Gilded Gala for Optic or Infinite and Cloud9 put on.
Yeah, I think Left Guy and the Carbon crew, I think you, Evie, Mushu, and the rest of the BGG crew included have done a ton for Tier 2. I mean, there is a whole Tier 2 scene of casters because I think of what BGG was able to accomplish and then inspire a little bit later. So the next question I have for you is, how do you keep, you talked about VOD reviews, but is there anything else in your kind of daily life that you do to keep yourself on top of the game?
Like, casting is no longer just a job. Casting is a lifestyle. So I've got to be in the gym. I go to the gym 6 times a week to make sure that I kind of put myself. This is my fault because I went for Monica Legday, so I kind of put myself in a corner. I can't.
It's like you might as well have just like called yourself Chad. My name's Harry Chad Legday.
Like, if I didn't call myself Legday, I wouldn't be going to the gym so much because I really enjoy it, but it takes up a lot of time. And it's hard when you're traveling, but I kind of put myself in the corner. I've got to remain physically fit or I'm a betrayal of my name, and therefore, like, my brand is inconsistent. But yeah, like, living as a caster is brand management. Like, I spend a huge amount of time on social media. For better or worse, I am addicted to Twitter, and that's led to me basically getting an undergraduate's degree in fucking memes. Like, I just spend so much time trying to think up funny or interesting tweets, and I had a banger today that's basically cross-referencing Shrek with Overwatch. Like, I'm a genius at, honestly. Like, if I fail in casting, I lied about streaming. I'm going to social media management for esports teams because I make some fire memes.
You strike me as a person who like types something up and then you go, huh. And then you press enter.
That's like my criteria for if I'm going to post something. If I laughed while making it, then I'm like, okay, this is. If I made it, I'm like, I haven't laughed at this. I'm just trying to force something out of this. I'm like, yeah, nah, delete it. But yeah, that's the criteria. If I laugh at myself while I'm making it, I'm like, yeah, this is going out there. I think this is funny.
I enjoy your tweets. You make me laugh 75% of the time, so I think that's pretty good for you.
That's a good occurrence rate when it comes to tweets. Like 75% of the time, that's above. We're like, I'm not unfollowing this for 25% that are unfunny.
So for some reason in my tweets, I've decided that anything that I talk about personally, I always end with a period. And it's so like not me. Like I'm so like boisterous and like in your face. But for some reason on Twitter, I'm like, I hurt my nose today. And that's it. That's it. So maybe I need to do a little bit of the leg day. If the test, I got to chortle before I send that tweet.
I always type with as much proper grammar and punctuation as I can. Wow. The English degree and I forget the word for punctuation. Wasted money, everybody.
Well,
it's all about character limits as well. Like, I'm like, where can I shave this off? Can I get rid of this period because I need another character? Like, it's a daily struggle in my life. But I'm like, can I give away this period to have that extra character?
Well, you're a character, Legday. I hope you know that. So let's talk a little bit more seriously about something, because we in Tier 2 Overwatch, just like to put it into perspective, Ham and I and Avast were the last new hires for Tier 2 Overwatch in the last year, right? So there hasn't been any new openings, and going into next year, there's been whisperings of expansion and new casters, this and that. But right now, there seems to be a dearth of casting opportunities. I mean, bringing up Rivalcade, it's you and Jaws and ZP and Avast, right? So what would you tell someone who is like, hey, I want to be an Overwatch caster? Like what would you honestly tell them in their process?
Fully honestly, move in horizontally, not vertically. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. Unless you are a god, there's a big line if you're just starting now, like you got to get past Kenobi, you got to get past you got to get past Big Hungry Phil, Blank's only just come up. You got to get past so many people who are incredibly talented.
Lemon and Hurix, yep.
Yeah, Lemon, Hurix, freaking Panda. I hold shift. You've got such a big queue to get past. And if you're at the back of that queue, like
you got to be bringing something special, right? And
you've got to already have a social media following. You've got to have a big old Instagram. You've got to be hot. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. These are going out on Disney XD and ESPN. These guys have sort of like, I imagine, vetoes on who appears on their screen. Like, you've got to be someone that a TV executive is going to look at, either because you're a character or because you're attractive, and be like, I want that on my programming. Like, you can get through tier 2 just looking anyway. And I hate to bring this up because it seems so superficial when it comes to casting, but if I want to give honest advice to people, like, I spend so much time in the gym because I need to be conscious that if I don't look good, my chance of getting into Overwatch League are lowered because I may be appearing on TV. And I think if you want to get into Overwatch at the moment in tier 2, you are joining the back of a big queue. Unless you're really good, you've got to move in horizontally. Go to another game. Ideally, go to an Activision Blizzard game, like Hearthstone. Go to Call of Duty. Call of Duty is currently opening up its path to pro scene. There are opportunities there. And then move in sideways. Because otherwise, you've got a long queue that you're at the back of. And I hate to be so negative about it, but I don't want to mislead anyone about what it is that will get you into casting. Like, like I said before, I was super lucky. I basically lucked into a job because I started at the right time. Like, timing was everything for me.
You and me both, man. Like, being prepared is just opportunity meets preparation, right? So when the opportunity came in and you got called up, because we actually just missed each other in our BGG times, right? You had just gotten called up to the EU contender side of things, and I just got into the server and started casting with Ham/Eevee, like Ham/Eevee. Who says that? And so, we just missed each other, but at the same time, like, if you weren't part of that BGG server when there is like 30 people in it, right? Before BGG special projects, before Open Division, right? Before South American contenders, you were already behind, right? And that was 2 years ago. And so maybe a little bit longer. And so what we got to do with BGG is we became the voices of tier 2. And then since Ham and I were on there, along with Lemon, who's had a lot of success so far, along with Hurix and some other people, Blank is another really great example of that. We got ahead of the tide. And in esports, you have to stay on top of the wave. If you miss the wave, you just got to find a new one sometimes, right? Because you're not going to catch up.
Yeah, like, luckily at the moment, there is also the same way that I got in that's currently open, and that's that no one seems to currently be doing rebroadcasts of stuff like NEXT LANs. Like, that's how I got noticed, and I brought Evie along on that, because Evie was the only one stupid enough to do it with me. Bless her soul. It's like, Evie, you want to do something stupid that might be a little bit illegal?
And if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, man. Yeah, but like, and it's all about the grind, right? And you're going to have to work extra hard right now. I'm not saying don't learn how to cast Overwatch. It is, in my opinion, the hardest game to cast. I've casted a lot of titles, and it is by far the hardest. Everything seems super slow compared to Overwatch when you go over there and cast it. But in general, like, be passionate about it. Learn casting, I think, is like the first thing you need to do. Find resources so you can become a good caster, and then like you said, latch onto yourself horizontally, right? Cast an Activision Blizzard game, cast Siege, which is always going to be ramping up in popularity, in my opinion. That's been a big surprise for a lot of people. There's opportunities in Rocket League, and then, like you said, there are opportunities in games that are quote unquote dead, like Heroes of the Storm, that no one's casting anymore. So you would be the only one. I'm currently on a TFT podcast, and we're like the only TFT podcast, and so people are watching it, right? And so it's really important to understand your strategy too. If you're going into it blindly, that's awesome that you want to learn a craft. It's like learning an instrument, right? But just like in music, there are hundreds of thousands of flute players that are better than you right now, right? And you need to get to the top 10, and it's going to take you multiple years to do that. And in esports,
what are you doing to make it so that in the same time they aren't getting further ahead than you?
Yeah, right. And so like in esports, you don't have that time, right? It's just sometimes you just have to move on, and it's unfortunate, but I think the landscape hasn't technically been completely taken so far because there are going to be some changes. There might be some changes in contenders in 2020. None of us know so far. None of us know if we're casting it or not. But
no one's going to be contacted until like a week before. That's just how it goes. Like these things are super liquid.
Yep, and you just got to be ready for the opportunity and be prepared for it. And it's an unfortunate thing to talk about, but I think you also do have to be realistic that Hearthstone has had the same casters up until recently for a very, very long time, right? Once you get a crew that people like, it's hard to break out of that unless you do have that big following already, unless you're already a content creator. So that's the other piece of advice that I like to give is if you really want to get into esports and Overwatch specifically, make content.
Yeah, be a brand. Like, you know who could move into casting and be pretty successful right now? The Master Crook. Like, people know him from his content. People think he's funny. And, well, he is funny. People don't just think he's funny. But people know he's funny is the thing. So he could be on a broadcast. He and Pachimari could duo cast something in the least serious way possible, and people would watch that because they enjoy this content. They like what these people have to say. So being a caster isn't good enough anymore to get ahead of people unless you are a god. Unless you are Uber 2, that's not working. But also something I wish someone had said to me when I first started casting is that casting isn't necessarily its own thing as well. Like it is its own thing, but don't think of it as just esports casting. Think of it as storytelling.
Yep.
Because it took so long for me to realize that it was storytelling. And it's the telling of stories, for getting people invested in players, in matches, and telling people why they give a shit about what they're watching, which is what makes a successful caster. And for a long time, I thought, and advice that I often have to impart upon other color casters, not because they're bad, but because they have the same understanding as me, is that I'm a color caster. Cool. I'm going to tell everyone exactly what I think about this game and tell them all the analysis that I notice because I am freaking smart about Overwatch. And people need to know that because to a degree, like, you need to go through that phase because you need to gain legitimacy as a color caster. People need to be able to trust what you say. And analysis is a good way to do that, but you can't do it at the expense of telling a story. You can't just pack your cast full of analysis because, sure, you're going to look smart, but you also look a bit like a dickhead who doesn't
really...
show.
Show.
Yeah, like, people tune out because you're vomiting information at them, and they're concentrating on too many things. Like, in League, I think you can get away with a little bit more analysis because you've got the time. In Overwatch, you don't have the time, and the audience don't have the mental bandwidth. We talked earlier about it's a confusing game to watch at the best of times. Currently, incredibly confusing to watch because of all the shields. The audience don't have the mental bandwidth, and you don't have the mental bandwidth to notice things while you're analyzing as well, to pick up all the information that you're currently throwing out, while also being able to watch what's on screen. It's just simply how the brain works, and you need to pander to how the brain works.
Yep, I totally agree with you, man. And so, yeah, if you want to be a caster, though, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm sure Legday would be happy to talk to you.
I feel it all the time. I love talking to people about it.
Yeah, and so talk to us. We'll be honest with you, and we'll give you honest feedback. We want there to be a nice crew of people to take the mantle because these Overwatch League guys aren't immortal. Right? Eventually they'll get too old. Hopefully, Overwatch League Season 20, we might see some new casting talent show up there. Maybe that's when Ham and I will finally make our way up. But in the end, we'll be realistic with you. We want the field to be collaborative. We want the field to feel good and have you be wanted in it. And please contact us.
We care about these players as well.
Exactly.
Like, I don't want to leave my players with, one of the better word, a bunch of amateurs. No, I want them to have skilled people who can tell their stories and make people care about their journeys. Because that's my goal as a contenders caster. That's the mission statement. Make people care that these players are going to go to Overwatch League. And if I don't think that casters will be able to do the players that I consider basically, they are my story babies. I need people who I can trust who are going to nurture this story and continue to have the audience care about these players. So we're always interested in having new, better casters because also it keeps us on our toes. Like, complacency has never helped anyone in the competitive sector, ever.
Yep, totally agree, man. So we're out of time, and this is actually something that I ask every single person on the show. It is an Overwatch show, and so my question to you, man, is why Overwatch? Why is this game the one that you kind of dove into? What's special about it?
Well, I was an MMO player before, and Overwatch was very interesting. Obviously, the marketing push for Overwatch, it had a media profile that would bring like tears to Benito Mussolini. Like, he would like, can I have that? Like, Overwatch's media profile was insane. So I was like, I'm going to try out the open beta of this. And I was a very experienced MMO player. Like, no joke. I was like top 10 in the world at my chosen MMO, which was Star Wars: The Old Republic, so it doesn't really matter that much. But I was a tank and a raid leader. So an FPS, I played it before, but only on Xbox. FPS is like Call of Duty. Like, joining Overwatch, I was like, I understand inherently how Reinhardt works because of my previous experience tanking, and I was an experienced shot caller from raiding. And that allowed me to very quickly get good at the game compared to people who'd come in as CSGO global elites who could just aim. But that wasn't good enough in Overwatch. Like, you needed more than that. So, like you, I'm a competitive guy. Like, if I join a game and I'm no good at it, I'm like, sod this. I'm going to go back to what I'm good at. Yeah. But I was instantly very good at Overwatch because of my understanding of tanking. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stick with this for a while. And I started learning to study Overwatch because, once again, as an MMO player, everything is quantifiable. Like, one of my hallmarks when I was casting very early, which I felt helped my legitimacy, is that I would throw out loads of stats to support my points. Like, I knew exactly how much HPS was going out. I knew how much DPS was going out. I knew what that damage boosted rocket damage was doing to armor. Like, being able to look at Overwatch through a mathematical lens made me feel like I had a really good understanding of it. And that kind of understanding was what pushed me to keep playing. And I was eventually competing in what was, not to toot my own horn, the most competitive open division, which was Season 1 of 2018, because that's where all the good players were before they got into contenders. No one was being asked to play, not in EU at that time. Like, British Hurricane was going to be formed just about then, but Cruz wasn't being invited to play. Only God wasn't being invited to play. I was playing against these guys in open division. And, well, it's kind of awkward, actually, because then I got contacted about casting it. So it's like, as we get towards playoffs, we got a chance of making it to playoffs. But at the same time, like, I can't play that because once I sign my contenders contract, that's going to be conflict of interest.
Yeah.
So I had to resign from the team when we finished at 7-3, which isn't that impressive now, but it was impressive back in the day. But yeah, that's why I got into Overwatch. It meshed very well with me as an MMO player, and Overwatch is in that sort of sweet spot where you can get the MMO players, you can get the MOBA players, you can get the Club Penguin players who are coming in.
Yo, Club Penguin used to be my jam back into the day. It was fun.
It's Geo's jam as well.
I forget, like, speed running in Club Penguin is how fast you can get banned, and that was so fun for a teenager, Chris. I don't know why, but hey, man, thanks for coming on. It was a wonderful pleasure having you. It was good to talk. It was a lot of laughs, a lot of fun. And to end, where can we find you on social media?
I'm at Legday Gaming, where it matters, on Twitch and Twitter. I'm Legday Cast on Instagram, but that's mostly gym photos, so only those of you who really want to see my nipples go over there.
Well, you heard it here first, guys. Nipples in Instagram, or nipples in Snapchat as well. I'm sure Legday is very, very familiar. Anyway, guys, that's been going on for us today. We're going to be going ahead and finishing up, and that's been what's been happening in Overwatch lately. We'll see you next week.